Welcome back, everybody. Episode 10. Brennan, who is our guest?
Our guest is Dr. Malik Boykin. He is a professor of psychology at Brown University, Ivy League, and his research focuses on intergroup relations, hierarchy, prejudice, mentorship, and racial identity. Nick, what was your favorite part of the episode?
There was a lot that I really enjoyed throughout this whole episode, but he really touches on mentorship and the role that it played in his life, and then also just I think the role that it plays in general in society. And so, yeah, be sure to listen and hear about his story and then how he applies this to his research now.
I mean, I loved the phrase that he may have just coined on our show, which is the human economy of helping. I think there's just a great undertone in the whole episode of just like being a steward of like goodness into the world that I think is like, there's no better time for that than right now. I think it was a great message, and he's a great guy, and I loved having him on the show.
Completely agreed. And he also creates music, and so we're gonna provide all the links to all his social medias, to his SoundCloud, because it's awesome stuff that he's producing outside of his research at Brown. So yeah, we hope you enjoy this one. We really enjoyed it, and it's just great to connect with somebody who really talks about the humanization of people and the leadership of people. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and stay tuned for Office Hours next week.
Enjoy it.
Thanks so much for taking this time. We really appreciate you being on. It's awesome to just be able to see you again and talk to you again and have this thing come full circle. If you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about how you got into the field of psychology and I guess research in particular, and you can share as much as you want about your story.
Yeah, it's well, first off, thanks for having me on. This is cool that you thought of me to have me on this particular forum. And it's good to see you again, Nick, and it's good to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Yeah, man. So, how did I get into psychology? Holy smokes, that's a tough question, right? For me particularly. There's a level where, oh man, sorry, these damn things are gonna chime. Sorry.
It's all good.
Yep.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with the fact that when I was in high school, my high school guidance counselor told me that I wasn't college material. Like it literally was just like, that in the meeting, towards the end of high school when it's like, we're gonna meet about your future kind of thing. This dude was just like, he said it to me like he was just very disappointed and sad to say it. And was trying to encourage me to like sign up for the armed forces. And I shook his hand. And I walked out of his office immediately and just went and did something else. It was just like whatever I'm going to do in the future is just not going to be informed by this fool's advice, And it's kind of trippy in the fact that my father's high school guidance counselor told him the same thing. And he's also a professor of psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, I'm a second generation person who, had to listen to their high school guidance counselor tell them that they're not college material, who is now the first African-American professor in a psychology department of an Ivy League school.
Mm.
As my father was the first Black psychology professor at Cornell back in the 1970s. So it's just like, we have this weird parallels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I say that in part to say that like, well, to some level, there was indicators, not a lot of indicators that I would be, academically successful, given, the kind of information that my guidance counselor was going on. I wasn't that great of a high school student. But I also grew up with a father who's a psychologist. And by that point in time, he had been a professor at a historically black college. So I grew up in a going to work with my dad when most of the people at his job were either black PhDs or black people working on their PhD, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like even when my grade said it was far fetched, it didn't seem unattainable because I'd seen so many examples of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think is just a very interesting context and a lot of I think it's an important thing to know because it's like to some level it's like my belief that it was possible even when it didn't look likely to some other people is as important to the story for me as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um. So I had gone to college, went to a historical black college, started at Howard University, where my dad was a professor. Had gotten in with relatively mediocre grades, but Howard is a kind of place that takes a chance on people, uh, and there's a lot of folks who I know who maybe squeaked in, but then their trajectories have been stellar. Once they got the opportunity to have a community of people that believed in them. Yeah. I left Howard to pursue hip hop music without a degree, and then I ended up writing on my resume for my first job after when I left Howard, where I was making eyeglasses. There's I wrote this section of my resume. It was like my future goals. I want to be a personality theorist, and even at that time, people were like, "What?" And I'm off like rapping and touring and making music and things. And it was just kind of like, man, if this doesn't work out, I'm gonna go to graduate school, right? And yeah, we came to this moment in I guess about 2000. It was 2007 where I was an independent artist. I was driving to Baltimore to see my then girlfriend, and it was just after midnight, it's late January, damn near almost to the day. I think it might have been January 28th or something like that. It was whenever Serena Williams was going to play Maria Sharapova in the '07
Mm.
Australian Open. I'm a huge tennis fan. And I was trying to get to my lady friend's house who was gonna watch the match with me. I smelled something that smelled like an electrical fire in the car. And I pulled over to try to check it out. I don't know very much about cars, but I didn't see anything that looked particularly out of line. And I tried to restart it, heard this really strange noise. I got out of the car and I looked underneath it and saw that the entire car was on fire. So I grabbed a few things, started walking up the road. 15, 20 paces up the road, my car exploded. Just went up in smoke, went up in flames. And that was the night into that morning where I was just like, I'm going to go back to school. At least going to need to finish my degree. Like the rest of my life is going to just, potentially suck if I don't, put myself on some sort of trajectory um, to make sense out of what my grown-up career will be, providing that the music doesn't work out. As an independent musician, your car really is your lifeblood. Like I'm, kind of hopping from state to state, doing shows here and there, couch surfing to cut costs when I could. But things halted and switched gears. Went and met with some of my mentors, some of the other professors that I had known from Howard, trying to figure out, what are next steps? Should I come back to Howard? Should I do something else? And came to the conclusion that I should go to a local state school, commuter school, that has a large online component. And I did that. University of Maryland, University College, finished my bachelor's degree there. while touring, while playing music. So I had face-to-face classes maybe Monday through Thursday, and then I took maybe 15 credits online per semester, where I could, Thursday night through Sunday, I could, be out touring, playing music. Ended up joining this folk rock band, and finished a degree in psychology. Finished a degree in psychology, and got the best grades I ever had gotten in my entire life at that point. Got my first 4.0 ever, and followed that up with another one and another one, and I think I got like a 3.8 my last semester or something like that. And started doing psych research. Was doing like a paid research assistantship for a couple of years, working for my dad, and got offered a independent record label deal, and my music partner and I couldn't meet the obligations. I told my music partner we got 1 year to do that, and if not, then I'm going to take the GRE and go to graduate school. The year came and went. Had to chat with my music partner. Was just like, bro, I gotta go, zag. Well, we've been zigging. I gotta zag, bro. And that the whole GRE thing is its own story. And ended up applying to PhD programs in psychology. Got rejected from all of them. Got into a master's program at Columbia University, which nobody's crying for me over that. And went there and 4.0 that, and applied to a PhD program at Berkeley, among others, and got rejected from everyone else except Berkeley. So Berkeley took a chance on me. Did well there. Got involved in some groovy research, and it kind of begat this, the pathway to the position I'm in now, as a professor at Brown. So, that's kind of the short, that's the short version of the story.
Man, I just can't help but think about how crazy that moment must have been, where you're walking down the road 15, 20 paces and your car goes up in flames. Had you not smelled that and pulled over, your life would be completely different.
There's a different take. There's a slightly different take on it too, right? I didn't have a cell phone. And so I was walking to go find a payphone. But if I had a cell phone,
wow,
then I might have stayed in the car and blown up with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Crazy.
yeah. And so in that moment when I'm walking down the highway, it's past midnight. It's January in Maryland. It's freaking cold. It was surreal. It was just my car is up in flames, and everything I could get out of it is in my pockets. And I don't know where the next exit is. I don't know what's on that exit. I don't know where I'm going to find a payphone. I knew I had $1, so I could get some change. So I knew when I made it to the payphone, I would be okay, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, there's one level. It's if I hadn't figured out that the car was on fire, I go up in smoke. If I had a cell phone, I maybe go up in smoke. And so it's I think of it kind of as a near-death experience, just kind of a
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know it's not like you actually completely started over, but in a context or in a certain way it is. And I think there's a beauty in starting over and starting fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you kind of touched on how mentors really helped you in that sense. And also that's kind of been some of your interests in general. What was the role of mentorship during that process for you?
It's been huge for me in everything. I mean, everything that I do, even now with as a junior faculty member, I seek the mentorship of senior faculty members to kind of help me navigate various situations. But in that moment, I didn't even know how to get, it's not like I had left school with like some stellar academic record and that going back would be easy, you know.
Mhm.
I really sought advice from people who, I thought would be, sympathetic to my cause and who I think still believed in me or saw something in me. And there's just a value in talking to people who are willing to plan steps, right? Like sometimes you know where you want to go, but you don't quite know how to get there. And talking to the people who have gone down some of these roads could tell you what the steps look like and just help you make better choices, less mistakes, and make better sense of what the task at hand is. So you know how big or small it is, or how long each step you need to take is. So it's mentorship has been crucial to everything, every step. And at that time, I talked to Professor Al Campbell, who had been at that time that was the psychology department chair at Howard. And I talked to Jules Harrell, whose book I still, I have on the shelf, whose work I still read. I actually just watched the interview with him, and he was interviewed by Nick Cannon or something like in the last
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But yeah, he gave me just great advice, and they both just felt like, you've kind of had the Howard experience, like the things that really make the Howard experience unique. You've kind of done those. So maybe it's time for you to move on from this context and experience something new. And they guided me towards going to the state college, and that was that was very important. And I think I got exposed to things there that I hadn't at Howard. So like the field of psychology in a lot of places is really not one where you get a lot of exposure to researchers of color. You know, Howard is a place where you get a lot of that, where the canon of psychology for me includes people like Frantz Fanon, where in other places it's like, who is that? Psychoanalysis, Freud, Jung, Adler, and at Howard it's like Anne Fanon, right? Um, but going to University of Maryland University College, I got exposed to like cross-cultural psychology and like even other diverse voices in the field that are neither black nor white, and or perspectives of psychology that were informed by an Asian experience. Didn't really get exposed to that, or didn't really have a chance to think about that in a scholarly way. But I had Young Chi Thung, was one of my professors there, taught a psychology of like religion and spirituality class that was influential, and he's a mentor. He wrote one of my recommendation letters for graduate school, and just really helped to expand my thinking in ways that I hadn't been exposed to, and yeah, literally every step of the way, every context that I've been in, I've sought mentorship, uh, and I've also thought a lot about how to be a good mentor and how to make sure that I'm, in the economy of help in humanity, that I'm both giving as I'm receiving, and hoping to give more than I receive. But how do you ever quantify these things? Just give a lot, but
Mhm.
also seek help. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that some of the research you've done has been on mentorship as well. Could you maybe give us a little bit more context on what some of the research focus that you've had in that space has been like?
Yeah, totally. So I applied to UC Berkeley to study mentorship initially. That was like the point of my graduate application. And I had come across some research on like cross racial friendship, and had these experiences in music where this band I found on MySpace, once upon a time that I toured a lot with. Well, it was an all white folk rock band. And growing up where I grew up in a very homogeneously black and brown Prince George's County, touring around with 5 white dudes was absolutely fascinating. One of the guys was like a devout Christian. The guitar player was a Jewish guy from upstate New York. The drummer was a white Muslim from New Hampshire, right? Like already you've got like diversity
Yeah.
of white men, which was just not even a thing I'd ever even thought of.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to Columbia. Well, I'm at UMUC. One of my mentors is Asian. I get to Columbia. One of my main mentors was a white Jewish lesbian woman, and it was clear that the there was an understudied component of mentorship that had to do with mentorship across difference, mentorship when people are of different races. And I thought that would be a thing that could be useful to people, to humanity at large. You meet people that want to connect sometimes, and culturally, via language or just misunderstandings or things that they're not able to connect as deeply as they maybe would like to. And I wanted to try to figure out, what are some things that we need to know to make that work better. So I read a paper called it was like, with a little help of my cross race friends, or with a little help from my cross race friends. It was like a play on the Beatles, title by Elizabeth Page Gold and Rodolfo Mendoza Denton. I forget who was first or second on that paper. And I love that paper. And I ended up reading another paper on social psychology of the classroom or something like that by Rudy Mendoza Denton. And I went to one of my mentors, Ed Gordon, at the time, and asked him about this guy, and he said, "Oh yeah, I know him. He's my former student. Yeah, Rudy."
Wow.
So I'm in a organizational psychology program where people are studying things like networking, the psychology of networking with network theory. And I thought about, what does networking look like across racial difference? And maybe we could take some of this work from cross-racial friendship and combine it with things from network theory, and look at, cross-racial mentorship. How do people reach their academic goals or career goals when, maybe they're in a context where all of the people that have accomplished what they're trying to accomplish are not the same race as them. And also, when a protege is not the same race as the mentor, how do we bridge that gap? That's where I wrote my recommendation. I mean, that's what I wrote my grad application on. And I got to Berkeley and I interviewed, and Rudy Mendoza Denton was basically like, "I just want a grant to study this exact same thing."
Wow.
I had no idea.
Perfect fit. There we go.
Like, when people talk about, fit, graduate school, getting into graduate school is all about fit. It was just kind of like, it's like the missing, like the two puzzle pieces that just needed to be put together. So I came to Cal, and we put together studies that were using methods from the cross-racial friendship paradigm, namely a paradigm where people sit and build rapport with one another, self-disclose, tell a few of the under the surface kinds of things about yourself back and forth across racial difference. And as that rapport grows, could you then have feedback, critical feedback that's given, be more useful, more warm, more valuable in a way that maybe it was not when that rapport did not exist. So we created an experiment to test this, and ended up publishing a couple of papers out of that data that I think have that people have found some value in.
Nice. Yeah. I was even just thinking this whole idea of like this cross racial mentorship.
Mhm.
Because in my head, I was like, instantly, I made a connection between some of the other work that you've done, and which would be like algorithmic bias and things of that nature, which we can get into in a moment. But in a way, the mentorship across races is kind of a way of like I can't remember the name of the gentleman, and I've been kicking myself here trying to remember his name, but there's a gentleman who is very well known. And actually, I think he was like a jazz pianist who has written a lot about how he's taken Klan members and helped like pull them out of the Klan. And I don't know if you are familiar with any of these stories, but um, what he did was he befriended these people and was able to like strip them of their biases and just open them up to a new way of thinking. And it's just really powerful stuff that he was able to do. I think he's something like 300 Klan members he was able to like give up the robes, I guess I think that's the right terminology. And it's so cool. And I'm just sitting here thinking like mentoring across people and, trying to get rid of biases is like there's a lot of similarities in those two types of work. I mean, just like trying to just grow as a person, as an individual, with these algorithms, same thing. We're trying to make them so that they're more open and inclusive and see other perspectives and not just be so focused on one thing. So, yeah, is that something you've ever like thought about or pieced together, that like your work in this section and of the mentorship and the stuff you're doing now are like how closely related they can be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of why I do it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a I guess when it comes to algorithmic bias, there's a level of it that has to do with scale. Like you're trying to stop things um, that are going to scale and really affect a lot of people. So, and the algorithms are trained on previous decisions, often that were made by people. And so algorithms are just reproducing the bias that people have already enacted. And so without being able to go and debias the people, you could try to statistically debias the algorithm, right? So
Mhm.
that people's lives aren't differently impacted in ways that they don't necessarily need to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, it's just it's another part of the same coin, and kind of communicating this work to people also is a communication to people about the biases of people and the decisions that are being made. And ultimately, in trying to mitigate any of it's really trying to create a more level playing field for people. It's trying to remove the penalties that people pay in society for being existing in a body that people project stigma upon, right?
Mhm.
It's really just a different part of the same work for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's so fascinating because like these topics, they just run so deep with like similarities and correlations. And I'm like that. I don't know. The thing I keep thinking about is like you don't learn anything new by hanging around the same people who are exactly the same as you, right?
Mhm,
You have
mhm.
to like step out and like experience other things and like be open to new opportunities and experiences in order to just grow as a human being. And
Mhm.
so I just really appreciate that part of your work and how similar it is to a lot of the work that you're also doing in other areas too.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think that trying to give people a fighting chance to, reach their goals and or to maintain their freedom or to, not to alleviate some of the headwinds that they face in society. Um,
Mhm.
and even in that process, you're also acknowledging these headwinds that people face in society. And yeah, so I mean, underneath it all, that's a lot of the work that I want to do and am doing. And even and when as it relates to cross racial mentorship, I feel like it's useful to think about on both sides of it, right? because I am also a person who has mentored people across race. So I've been mentored across race, but I also mentor across race. And there are things that I want to know and do better, and better learn how to connect with people and make sure that the relationship is as productive as it can be, so that people can accomplish the goals that they are uh, seeking my support to try to accomplish, right? So yeah, I mean, and I mean, I don't necessarily live in a world where I think we'll alleviate all of it, but I think that in a relationship or a system of people, I feel like you can get a lot of work done and alleviate it, within a system of people. And I just hope that as a person who is doing this work, that I'm doing the best that I can to eliminate barriers to communication and openness to help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my experience of first meeting you. So just to give people like a little bit of background, um, while you were at UC Berkeley in your PhD program, I was at a community college and was able to become a research assistant in your lab and what one of the projects you were working on. And I remember like going to meet you for the first time in Tolman, and I was like, oh man, this like I felt like I was just this community college student. Here's this PhD student. Uh, like I got to put on my best face. This is going to be like kind of intimidating. And then I remember meeting you in the lounge, and you were just so personable. Like I don't even think we talked about what the role was going to be. Like right away, for the first 15 minutes, it was like, "Who am I?" You explained, "Who are you?" Um, and I was like, "Wow, this is really nice." And so I know that we didn't connect a ton after that because obviously you were busy and I was doing other stuff. But still, I felt like there was a mentorship piece in that just by being able to connect emotionally rather than just like telling me, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. Uh,
Mm.
so that, yeah, just getting under that piece of like, can we connect on who we are as people and then maybe collaborate and produce good work together? Like there's such a power in it, and there's such a, yeah, it was a really good feeling. And so it's something that I try to be mindful of when I like am working with other people, is that I don't have to strictly talk about business because it's not worth it all the time.
Yeah, yeah, man. I mean, I think that there is a component of that. I just, I'm glad that you explained it for a while, because I was trying not to tear up. I didn't want to, be over here crying on the camera or something. But I mean, I think that what you describe is important. I mean, that is important to me. I don't want uh, I don't ever want things to be transactional, right? I want to connect with people. I want to do work with people, and I wanted to have a mentorship connection with you. You know,
Hmm.
um, you did fabulous work for the lab. I know that you worked on some of the mentorship studies that ultimately were published, and that some of what we needed was recruitment, and you helped us a lot with that. That was a really tough study to recruit for, you know, and you really helped us bring that to fruition. But yeah, I mean, but it was important. I mean, we're a team member. We're yeah, teams consist of people.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, and just that piece, I felt like gave me confidence to actually be a good team member. Right? It didn't. I felt like I wasn't viewed as somebody who's just kind of a pawn in this lab. It was somebody who can bring value. And I think like Brendan and I have been having a lot of conversations just about leadership and like company culture in general too. And I think that that's just like such a strong and positive way of breaking down maybe some power dynamics and barriers to really get the best out of each other and the work and the relationship.
I believe wholeheartedly in everything that you just said, and it's part of my work. It's part of what I hope to communicate to people. It's part of what I hope will permeate outward, you know?
Mm.
And just the fact that was your experience is means the world to me. Like
Mm.
I really, really just appreciate you saying that. And I hope that anybody that is listening to this, you know, in the roles in which they lead, that they, you know, really take these words to heart and understand that that's just, you know, a part of what leadership should consist of. It's a part of what mentorship should consist of, and that it's you know something that we can pour ourselves into and connect with people, and you know make the work better and make
Mhm.
each other's lives better. And
Yeah. Yeah, I think like it's easy to not think about kind of the impact we can have on people, like both positive and negative. Like I'm thinking about your experience with the guidance counselor or the college counselor. Like if you didn't have that view of growing up around academia and seeing these different people achieve that, like that could have completely altered your route, right? And that's really sad. Like it's really frustrating.
that is actually in my personal statement to Berkeley of
Mm.
why I wanted to do what I wanted to do, why this was important to me, because I had the opportunity to weigh what he had to say about me with this alternative, you know, perspective that like, no, these things that I want to do actually are worth investing in, and I'm worth investing in, right?
Hmm.
And not everybody's going to have that. So how do we equip people with the kinds of tools to see across difference? To you know, maybe if he saw more of himself in me, then maybe he wouldn't have had that kind of perspective of me. Maybe if he actually talked to me and got to know me, then he might say something to encourage me as opposed to something to tell me that you know investing in my mind with an education is not worth doing, right? And
Hmm.
so I mean that's literally it. That's literally why. I mean, you know, when uh, when I talked with people about going into doctoral programs because they're a hard road, and it's I feel like if you're doing it, you're almost inevitably going to come to a point where you may want to quit, and you're going to need a why that's going to keep you there. And that really was my why, like the fact that you know there are people who for whom this information may impact their lives in ways that I've never even, you know, somebody somewhere will read a paper or hear this conversation and go and impact somebody else's life in a way that we may never have access to. And that was worth it for me. That was worth those long nights to try to get here wherever here is. And you know, you
Yeah, I
know,
mean, I think every decision that I have like really made is like as kind of like a life shifting, whether it be like playing sports and like I made like a huge jump going from one sport in the middle of my youth to a completely new sport that I've never played before, from choosing my degree in my undergrad to going into my master's program. Like, I think all of them had to do with some kind of impactful moment that I shared with another person. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And yeah, just like you can't discredit the value of having good strong bonds with people and like having those interactions, because like that's what life's about, and like sharing them and like growing as a person like through these mentorships is like, yeah, it's been so valuable for me to like be in those positions and have those realizations, and somebody taking the time out of their day to like try and help me better myself.
Mhm.
um yeah, it's like I just like you two said, it's like whenever I get the opportunity to be mindful about how I potentially have the opportunity to impact somebody else in a positive way, like like you said, we all we can do is try and just do a lot of it,
Mhm.
and just try and stack up as much of that good good mentorship moments as we can, because like, we owe it to the people who did it for us.
exactly.
Yeah.
And who will continue to do it for us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? Like
Yep.
at every stage, there is like the things that you uh, wish you knew about what the next steps are. And there are, people that are a few steps ahead or a lot of steps ahead that you can call on and ask, be them uh, mentors in the job place or, mentorship with things that we are in our personal lives. I'm not a father, but when I do become one, I'm sure I'm going to be talking to folks about what that part of life is like,
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. And so it's just there's just a human economy of helping, and we should just be giving to that economy as we also seek support from that economy.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. People have so much to offer, and it can easily go unnoticed if we're not in support of it. Like you said, like colleagues or students at Howard that you saw that maybe got in and weren't really supported very well before, and so they weren't shining, and then a little bit of support and encouragement, and they're doing amazing things.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, totally. So there's some of the folks I know in the world that have just, you know, amazed me on this particular journey of life. And even, folks that I remember in the freshman dorm that were pulling all the silly pranks, this went on to, they're like headline makers impacting the world in very real ways. And it's just like, wow, and I know a lot about their stories, and I know that a lot of what had enabled their stories to play out in the ways that it had was mentorship, people seeing something in them and helping them along. But there's also a component of asking, authorizing yourself to ask as well, uh, and having a person that's willing to catch you and support this ask and help it actualize into the steps that you need to take to be the person that you want to be in the world. So I think that those things really go hand in hand. Mentorship often begins with an ask. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I know we brought up the algorithmic bias. It's something that I feel like I hadn't really thought of before, uh, which now I can easily see how it's so impactful, and it's something that we definitely should be mindful of. Um, could you kind of, I guess, just explain what it is, and then maybe if you could give like an example of how there is a bias today, or something that is a little more practical that people could better understand of how this is impacting us?
Yeah, I mean, algorithmic bias at this point in time is just it's tucked into so many parts of our lives, right? Like even right now, our rendering on each other's Zoom screens is the result of some algorithm, right?
Mm.
And you can imagine that Zoom has done a good job with this sort of thing, right? But like if they had some way that the rendering of black faces was like jacked up on the screen and nobody else, right? Everybody
Mhm.
else is fine. If you're black, you show up and you're pixelated, right? But as ridiculous as that is, we've seen instances where the algorithms that pick up a hand under a faucet are like, oh, there's no hand here because it's a black hand and the algorithm was not trained to recognize black hands, right? And so on and so on and so forth. So, one of the algorithms that has been the subject of a lot of debate and research is an algorithm called Compass that was implemented, I think it's Broward County, Florida, where they have a recidivism risk score. And the investigative journalism organization ProPublica audited the decisions that were made by the Compass algorithm. And they looked at its performance on several years worth of decisions made about black defendants and several years worth of decisions made about white defendants, and demonstrated that this thing was more inaccurate, had a different false positive rate where, people were being, thought of as high risk, like you were being paid a penalty for being black, but partly tied on to the fact that Compass was trained on judge decision data, right? And so, people are getting scores back and with similar records or non-records or whatever, black folks were getting denied bail at a higher rate. And then there's this debate of, well, if you're going to debias an algorithm, how do you do it? So a number of computer scientists and statisticians started trying to figure this out, right? And they came to this conundrum, which they have multiple statistical definitions of fairness, right? And then if you have a scenario where you affix one definition of fairness, like, okay, we're going to make the false positive rates equal for these two groups. Well, then now you've likely made it more inaccurate for one group. Well, we're going to fix the accuracy. Now there's a differential odds ratio or something, right? And so it's this kind of this almost rock, paper, scissors of statistical definitions of bias that you could satisfy that are mutually exclusive. Like, how do we fix this thing? And in a sense, that's where our research comes in. Just trying to understand which of these are the most egregious to people, and does it matter if they read about one group experiencing greater bias of this statistical type? Are they more upset if it's their group or another group? Which of these do people prefer to have themselves subjected to versus having others subjected to? And I think as we resolve that, then we have better information with which to try to make algorithms more fair in society. So that's kind of the approach.
Yeah. Yeah, because it seems like these algorithms that we're putting out here, I mean, I don't know the extent of what the process is like in creating the algorithm and then putting it into place, but it seems like it just kind of gets thrown out there, and then the data is actually the actual impact that it's having on people in the real world, and it's not something that is researched or tested prior to.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's the only way that you could is if you have, well, yeah, and to some level, it would be impossible to know how it's going to perform in society,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you also know that you're going to train it on some data. And many times people aren't asking the question of if it's going to differentially impact people, right? And so that also ends up being part of the problem. Like, if nobody in the room is like, is this going to impact groups differently? Then you're going to unleash it, and then you're going to find out on the back end that it's
Right.
impacting groups differently. And, you'll probably find out when it's too late, when there's like a lawsuit or something, right? And so there's also a level of it that is dealing with, legal risk, mitigating legal risk. But it's also pretty shitty to just, unleash algorithms in the world with no sense of responsibility about the fact that they might differentially impact people, which is often what's happening. It's tough. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of opinion or perspective that you could share on anything going on with like the Social Dilemma documentary or in that realm? Are you familiar with that?
I think I've heard of this. Is this the thing about like social media or something?
Yeah, and I guess to maybe reframe my question for you, I think about this stuff, and I really am just like, man, how have we gotten to this point where we allow these businesses to create these like algorithms or business models around algorithms that feed people data and feed off of people's data to like be their business model, um, without really having to understand or like thoroughly research the consequences of what these algorithms do. I don't know. Do you have like a perspective on how maybe a company or um, maybe an example of a company that does it particularly well? Like how do we navigate this? I guess is the like the core of my question, because it seems so dicey. Like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, like even the example you gave that I hadn't even like going on in Florida. I hadn't heard of that like that system in particular. I do know that there's a lot of stuff going on, especially in like the recruiting world, because I'm kind of more of a HR's kind of like where I work in. So, like with the recruiting side of stuff, like these biases come out all the time, and like how are we sorting resumes and all this other stuff. So, I mean, that's a big one. But how how does it get sorted through? It's just such a dicey topic.
This is a very, very hard question to ask. And
It was a big question. I didn't really. I kind of changed it mid flow because I realized it was
yeah,
getting pretty broad. But
I mean, the tough, the really tough thing about your question, from my perspective, is that it's hard to untangle your question from the existence of machine learning in the context of capitalism. Like,
yeah,
as people are trying to do market research, which we have been doing, in other ways with, focus groups or whatever, the whole advertising world. Well, when you have a platform that has the ability to collect such fine-grained data, then people are going to use it for market research
yeah,
and then try to figure out how to sell you the exact thing that is going to divest you of your money, right? Because that's like kind of how capitalism works, right?
mhm,
So I just don't know how to answer that question
yeah. I
in
guess maybe
capitalism.
just to go, because I really like the way you phrased that, and maybe another way to think about it, or maybe just to get another piece of your perspective. When we are collecting data as a as a society on people, but we're collecting data on an imbalance, like an already imbalanced society. So inherently the data is imbalanced, kind of like you were saying, like where is this data coming from? How, in your eyes, like are I think the answer is no, but are we doing a good job, or is anybody doing a good job really trying to like fairly assess this data? And is there is there things that you're seeing that people can do to really make sure that the ethics of the data collection and the way they're using the data can be improved?
Probably it could be collected more ethically. The question then would be, what would be the incentive to collect it more ethically,
Yeah.
right? And in a society where like faster, better, cheaper is often the ethic, to accumulate as much wealth as possible, then you have a competing ethic, right? There's like, how do we be more fair? How do we make more money, right? And yeah, I don't know how you would then incentivize people to do that
Yeah.
when it's going to be costly to
Mhm.
them, right? So you could either legislate it,
Mm.
or go through some sort of political process to mitigate the ways in which they're using data. And I think that you're seeing some pushback against data usage coming from the UK. But we're not doing that. We're
Yeah.
not doing that here. And and people are getting paid for it, and it's just kind of like, I don't want to not make $15 billion this year because these folks think that it's unfair, right? So I don't know. It's a big thing you're pushing up against,
Yeah.
a very well resourced thing that you're pushing up against, and you're pushing up against it with an ethical argument. But you know, I mean, this nation, among many, have done many exceptionally unethical things in the service of profitability,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of our advantage uh, in the early goings of this nation was slavery. That did not necessarily end because it was unethical. It ended because it was not profitable, profitable in a sense. You know, so it's I don't know. It's hard. I think if we're gonna ask people to do the right thing versus make a bunch of money, I'm not familiar with too many instances where the right thing just somehow magically prevails.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
even kind of like laughing at myself for the question because I'm sitting here thinking like I just asked a question about like is there any like I was asking about a band-aid to a solution to something that has a root cause problem that's different. And I
Mhm.
think the point you're making, which is like great, is that we need to fix society so society is giving more quality data, right? Like
For real.
it's not the question of the like yes, we need to be smart about how we're utilizing the data, but we need to get a better input of data by a healthier and more, open and inclusive society first, and then we will have better data.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah,
that
I kind of laughed at myself for asking such a silly question because I kind of came to my own realization that like that question was kind of the
Mhm.
yeah, I mean,
wrong
sometimes
point.
yeah, sometimes conversations are important for us
Yeah.
to to come to understanding. So, you know,
Mhm.
glad we're having it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I wanted to ask too. I think you kind of hit on it with like really knowing your why in your work is really important. But is there a piece of, I guess, advice you would give to somebody who's like might be interested in getting into psychology or getting into grad school in general? Is there something that you'd really like to hit home for somebody listening?
Yeah. Um, I feel like there's a few pieces there. So I hope I'm not going to be too long winded, but you know, uh, for getting into graduate school, I really feel like finding the right place to send yourself. Sometimes it's not the brand name or the you know part of the country, but sometimes it's like the right questions and the right people and the right mentors. Really, you know, just focus on the part of it that's truly important about what it is that you're trying to do for graduate school. I mean, I sincerely believe that, you know, if Rodolfo Mendoza Denton was at some other place in the country, that where he was going to be the right place for me to go to graduate school. Now, when it comes to the GRE and that whole kind of part of applying to graduate programs, I also very sincerely believe that preparation, that the long hours of trying to pull these concepts that maybe you don't understand in the moment into your understanding is really the way to go. I studied for me. It took me about 100 days straight of studying for the GRE. Not less than 2 hours on any day. Most days 4, some days 6 or 8. Um, not saying that, you know, somebody might take them 300 days. Somebody else might take them 30. But it was the the uh, the idea that's tucked into, or is really the point of Carol Dweck's research, like this whole thing about mindsets and thinking about mastery goals as opposed to performance goals. It just got me you know, the philosophy that I needed to really improve my score. So I know on that I went from a math score of about 310 out of 800, which is horrific, to about a 730 out of
Wow.
800, which was really good, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's just like you don't get from 310 to 730 without the belief that it's possible, without putting the work to get there. You know what I mean? And putting together a plan to get there. For me, that plan included, man, there's so much stuff I don't know. Let me go back. Let me get like a high school textbook and relearn things that maybe I didn't even get the first time. So I'm literally doing 100 problem practice banks of like basic arithmetic to really hammer this home. And that was just crucial part of the story. It takes a lot of humility, and I think that for me, it was to look at a 310 out of 800 with your name on it, and think that you have a pathway upward. Just takes a lot of belief in a future version of yourself that is going to be able to do well. And I think that really ultimately is the thing that I am that I would want to communicate, that the work is an investment in a future version of yourself. So it's not just believing in yourself now, but believing that yourself now can put in the work needed to be the future version of yourself that you want to be. Believe in that. And that's the
I like that.
What I would want to communicate.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's a perfect way to really end this conversation, to be honest. That was a perfect message. So yeah, thanks so much for this time. It's so great to connect.
This was a great conversation, and I look forward to seeing this, and hopefully that somebody will hear it, and it'll be a useful thing for them to get them through their day and to where they need to get. So thanks for the platform.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wrote down human economy of helping. You said that earlier in the podcast. I'm going to remember that. I really like that.
Maybe I'll write it down too.
There we go.
Thanks so much.
No doubt. All right. See y'all. Thank you.